All right, hello everybody, and welcome to the Magical Learning Podcast for this week. Today we're very lucky because we've got a guest, and we'll get to them shortly. But first, let's go around the horn and see how our usual group is doing. So I might start with Danette. Danette, how's your week been so far?
Our week's been really good because this morning Graham and I became grandparents again. Woohoo! Very excited. And Jeremy became another uncle again. So how cool's that?
The same uncle, just twice. Maybe.
Yes.
So yeah, it's been a great week. Thanks, Jez.
Awesome. Well, then I might just go straight to Graham. Graham, how are you going today then?
Yeah, I'm good, Jess. Thank you. Yeah, exciting news. So as 7 o'clock last night, it was like, yeah, nothing happening at all. And then 5:10 this morning, she was like, yeah, I want out. So that was very exciting. Other than that, it's been a fun week at home. Managed to get some lawn mowing done, which is always a wonderful experience.
Perfect. Nice and relaxing, nice and easy. I love that.
We should
Al?
share that she was a little girl called Aubrey.
Yes. For those listening and following along at home. So also congratulations to Liv, who is also an employee at Magical Learning. Congratulations. And Al, how's your week been?
It's been great, Jez. I always sort of notice how life's like a roller coaster, and we have our good times and the tougher times. And I can relate to Graham where this week's been great, and I've even enjoyed mowing the lawn.
A great week. Well, perfect. We've got a lot of lawn mowing going on. So our guest, I'm expecting something from you to do with lawn mowing here as well. Seems like the week for it.
No pressure.
No.
I was just about to say, I'm sat here looking at my lawn, looking at how it's grown in the sun and the rain. And yeah, my hubby's been struck down with COVID. So there has been no lawn mowing in the Markwick household.
Oops.
Well, that's all right. We've got two capable people here. You guys are happy to jump over and do that ASAP. Is that all right?
Absolutely.
It depends on the vehicle that's being used to mow the lawn.
It is a ride-on, though it is a temperamental ride-on. You often have to re-put the belt on each time, which is another reason my hubby tends to
we've had one of those.
Leave it till the last minute or send one of the boys out to do it instead.
Awesome. Well, that voice that you're hearing, if you're listening to this podcast, is Claire Markwick, the founder of Reignite Performance Coaching. So Claire, how are you this week?
I am great, thank you. Yeah, off the back of that kind of impromptu sort of butt in there, we did do 4 rat tests last night, so we are all now COVID free, thank goodness, which is a big relief actually, because you know, like you hear about it and obviously it's been on the news for like ever and you hear about it, but then when it's actually in your house, it's like, oh God, now what am I supposed to do? So I was freaking out because I'm a last minute person and I've still got to do all the school shopping supplies and stuff. I'm like, oh my God, now I'm not going to be able to go and do all the boys shopping. And can they even go to school? So yeah, I'm great because I don't have to worry about that now.
Awesome. Well, I'm glad everyone's COVID free there. That's great to hear. So Claire, I guess what I wanted to do is, first of all, I wanted to thank you for being on the podcast. It's always awesome having a guest on, and you are a perfect guest. And I also would really encourage people to check out the Real Life Business with Claire Markwick podcast, and specifically episode 36, which is The Power of a Great Question with Danette Fenton-Menzies. So it's a little bit more bang for your buck.
Self promo plug there.
Absolutely. But Claire, I just thought for people listening that may not know who you are, do you want to give a quick bio of who you are and just so people can find out?
Sure, I will try and be quick. I did love at the start, I'm going to do a little bit of a behind the scenes sneak peek here for listeners. At the start, we were talking about how long it was going to go for and that sort of thing. So, but I do apologize. You probably gathered already. I do like to talk. So if I completely smash your schedule out of the water, I apologize right now. So yes, I am the founder of Reignite Performance Coaching. I come from an accounting background. I've had over 15 years in the accounting and finance world, and cutting a very long story short, I got to the point where numbers were no longer like filling me up. I totally lost my career mojo, and that kind of corresponded with the time I was going back to work after having our second child. And essentially, missing out a whole heap of detail, I found the world of coaching, and I discovered that my reason for being here was to inspire others and to help others perform at their best. So hence Reignite. It's like reigniting the energy within people to perform to their best. So that's probably as succinct as I can probably go in what I do now.
Yeah, that was amazing. That's it. That was perfect. So thank you so much for that, Claire. Yeah, and you do business coaching, leadership development, teamwork, and youth programs. So all of those available for people that want to check that out. I'll include the link in the podcast description here, so you can go check out Claire and Reignite. Now, I sent Claire just saying, oh, do you want to be on the podcast? And Claire sent back some great topics. And the one that I really, really loved was self-awareness, which I think is a great topic. So first of all, Claire, great selection for a topic. Thank you for that. I've sent that topic round to everybody at Magical Learning, and we got some questions back. And so I just wanted to maybe get everyone to ask their question, say why you asked that question, and then I can get Claire to break it down. And then we can just add any comments after that about what we think and things that we may have learned from that. So I'll start with you, Graham. Graham, what was your question and why did you pick it?
So I actually have two questions. The first is, what's the square root of 10 to the 6th decimal place? But then I realised that it's not a really helpful question. So the other one, 3.162227776.
Awesome.
Why did I ask the first question? Because I lack self-awareness, clearly. So we have, as human beings, we have a tendency to overrate ourselves in some areas in terms of our capabilities. And it's a fun thing to go through if somebody asks you a question, how do you rate your skill? And, oh yeah, look, I'm probably I don't know, 11.5 out of 10. But then when you get a 360, and that person goes and asks some other people that know you well, the same question, it comes back as a 1.1 out of 10, slightly different. So my question was, in your experience, what makes it hard for many of us to actually develop better self-awareness?
I really love this question when I saw it, because the first thing that immediately popped out to me is that I don't think it's hard to develop self-awareness. I think we've all got it. What is hard is recognizing it and understanding it. So it's, we all have the capability to be self-aware. It's just whether we are able to tap into it. I think that can be the challenge. Yep. And I honestly believe, and this has kind of come from a bit of my own experience, that it comes from why it's so hard to sometimes follow what's true and really understand ourselves and be self-aware is because it's so easy to get swept along with the momentum of the status quo and of societal norms. And, I say that from experience, from being in the accounting profession. So as we've probably learnt already, I like to talk. I'm very animated. I use my hands a lot. I love a chit chat. I love a story. And that personality didn't always fit in some of the accounting firms that I worked for. And I learned over my career that I had to zip it, and I had to just sit down and, sit at my computer and crunch out numbers. Yep. And I became very conditioned to my environment, and therefore very unaligned to me and myself. And I've only got that knowledge now looking back. At the time, I thought I was just doing what I had to do. Is this answering your question? So I think in terms of why it's hard for us to recognize our qualities, recognize our strengths, recognize our preferences, recognize how we work best, I believe is very much comes from the conditioning of how we think we ought to believe, and the environments that we're finding ourselves in, and the cultures of the workplaces that we find ourselves in. It's just kind of this natural human tendency to kind of fit in. Instead of exploring who we all are as individual people. And if we were to do that instead, we might find that we would operate a lot more effectively. We might perform a lot better. We might be more fulfilled. We might be less exhausted and stressed and anxious and all of that stuff. So yeah, there's probably a bit of a ramble, but I hope that's sort of answered.
Oh, it does. Thank you. So if we were sort of to put a bow around all of that, it is one of the things that makes it hard for us to tap into, maybe rather than, to develop self-awareness, is our belief of other people's expectations of us.
Yes, I think that's a very
cool. Thank you.
Putting it. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I think I really love the point you made about culture, Claire, there, saying that there's the focus isn't on developing yourself, the culture is about fitting in. So I think that that's also a really good answer. So thanks for that. And great question, Graham. Awesome work.
Absolutely.
I also love having everyone else ask these questions because they always ask things that I would never think of. So it's always awesome to have everyone else from ML here. And speaking of everyone else from ML, Al, I'd love for you to talk about your question and we'll ask you a question and then maybe talk a little bit about it.
Oh, thanks, Jed. Claire, I guess I'm curious, probably the next step after you've had that self-awareness in the accountant where you knew that wasn't working for you, I'm wondering what was it that either sort of motivated you or inspired you to leave after 15 years and start something else?
That is a fabulous question. And it is one that I toyed with over a number of years. I guess looking back with hindsight, with retrospect, I probably reached the point where I knew that I needed a change a lot earlier than I actually made the change. And it took a few sort of natural progressions, moving states, and job opportunities being thrown at me, sort of thing, after I moved to really kind of cement that in. So backtracking a little bit, I talked before about how I felt I had to play a role and how I felt I had to fit in to be in that corporate space. I thought to myself that I can't be me, I can't be Claire, I have to be this role. And I could do that very well to a point. I found when I had kids, when I went back to work after having kids, anyone out there who is a parent with a new baby, my babies are not babies anymore, they're grown up or growing up, but at the time, obviously, well, after they were born, they were babies, and your priorities shift, things change, and I had less capacity to use my energy to play a role of someone I wasn't. And so I would go to work and I come home and I would be shattered. I would be exhausted mentally, physically, and I just felt done. I just felt empty. And I felt that I wasn't giving what I needed to give as a mum to our boys. Mm-hmm. And so that was probably the start of it. However, a six-figure salary and comfort makes it very hard to recognize that as enough of a reason to leave. So I think that the next sort of nudge for me was when we moved from WA to New South Wales. It was a natural break. I left the firm that I was working for, and obviously we moved interstate. So we moved to a different town, and I got reignited, re-energized by moving into a commercial finance role. So anyone in the finance world will know going from public practice to commercial finance is very, very different. And that was where I really started to develop my awareness of my love of building relationships with people and recognizing that, although I was a finance business partner, like my role predominantly wasn't about reporting numbers each month. My role was about building relationships with the sales managers, with the operational managers, with the planners, and helping them make decisions. Cutting a very long story short, there were things about that role that I didn't love so much. And that was what eventually got me to the point where my husband said, you know what, because I was starting to build my coaching business on the side, and we just sort of said, you know what, we're at the perfect time. The kids are at an age where they're a little bit more self-sufficient. They're not quite at high school yet. They're not quite at teenage years yet. We're comfortable financially. If you're going to make the jump now. And so that was sort of the final nudge. But I think in answering your question, if I can tie the neat little bow around my own ramble this time, I think what it came down to was enough factors pushing me, enough signs pushing me in the direction, because we don't always act on, I certainly don't anyway, act on the first couple, but there were just so many that were sort of pushing me in a different direction. And that last role, as I say, where I started to really recognize the importance of building relationships, communicating with people differently to get the most out of them, that's when I'm like, this is where I'm at. This is where I need to be, helping people do what they do better by understanding themselves better. So it was kind of that final nudge, I think, that got it over the line.
Well, thanks for that, Claire. What really stands out there is that final nudge from your husband, who's supporting you, where often I can see our partners will want to keep us in that comfort zone. It's wonderful he supported you as you've jumped out.
100%. I couldn't, like, there's been so many times along the way. We both have our own businesses, and so it's flipped and changed. I went into that commercial finance role full time with 2 young kids, one in kindy and one just started at daycare, to enable him to start his own business and get himself set up. And so we've kind of just done swings and roundabouts, like one or other of us would take the primary parent role while the other was building their business, and vice versa. And so, yeah, he has been instrumental in support. Absolutely.
Oh, that is great to hear. Thanks, Claire.
Pleasure.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. That was amazing. And it's also good because I think it's going to tie into maybe some questions later, some of these factors that were helping you there. But I just wanted to welcome John Scollin to the podcast. Hello, John. How are you going?
Very well, thanks, Jess. Sorry I'm late.
That's all good.
How are you going?
Good to see you again.
Hey, John.
Always good to have you on. Awesome. Well, I just wanted to jump into, I think Danette's got a bit of a 2-parter question. So I might jump into you, and then John, you might be able to throw a question out there as well after that, I reckon. But yeah, so Danette, tell us your questions and then why you chose them.
Cool. And hi, John. Great to see you as well. So Claire, I know you work with a lot of leaders. We work with a lot of leaders. So my first part of my question was really about, why is building your self-awareness so important for leaders?
I think there's so many reasons, and I was thinking about the ways to answer this. There's so many different ways I could answer this, but I think probably the single biggest thing that stands out to me is, if we don't understand how we operate best, if we don't understand how we perform most naturally, we start doing what I did at the start of my career and at the start of my leadership career, acting in a way that I thought I needed to act. I had these perceptions of what I believed a good leader was. And I therefore changed what I felt was right in my gut, and I started behaving in the way that I thought I needed to behave. Now, what that meant was I slipped into micromanagement. I slipped into like real nitpicking. I slipped into having to have control of absolutely everything, needing to know everything that was going on. And it was bloody exhausting, if I can say that. Like it was insane. And I got myself so stressed out and so just overwhelmed. And I couldn't understand how I was even supposed to do my own work, because I was so focused on making sure everything else was right. And, everyone else was doing the right thing. So that's an example of what I think happens when a leader, or anybody, but when a leader is not being true to themselves and being congruent, and isn't recognizing their own strengths and isn't working to their own strengths, and is just playing a role.
Love that. Yeah.
I just wanted to just jump in quickly. I loved one thing that I thought was really interesting there, and I think is a sort of interesting way to look at this is, I like the way that you described it as like it didn't feel natural, like in a way that things can feel natural. And that also some of the words you're talking about when you're saying like, it was a lot of feeling words in the positive way. Like I had a feeling in my gut that this was not the right thing and stuff. I love that the way that you're describing it is describing it as like a sensation almost.
And that's the thing. And this is what I'm learning. And I'm sure you guys are fully all over it as well. But like, for those listening, we do all operate from different preferences. And for me, I do operate a lot from the feeling side. I from my heart, from how I feel about things, from I keep doing it. I'm using a lot of visual as well, like how things feel, my gut and my intuition. That's how I operate best. But before I kind of had full awareness that was okay, I was saying to myself, the story I was telling myself was, you can't be in a leadership position and make decisions just on how you feel about it. Like, that's stupid. That's not professional. Who do you think you are, kind of thing. You've got to think things through logically. And yes, of course, there are times, depending on the gravity of a decision or a situation, there are times where you need to back up that feeling with logic. For someone who operates how I operate, there will also be people that are very logical, very fact, data, analytical driven, that need to tap into a little bit about how they feel about things. And that is what this whole self-awareness piece is all about. It's about recognizing where our natural, when I'm working with kids, I call it superpowers, where our natural superpowers are. And it's just as relevant for adults as it is with kids. And operate within that, but then recognize that, okay, this is what I do naturally, but there might be times where I've got to maybe dial down my jazz hand storytelling a little bit, and be a bit more subdued. And sometimes I have to physically sit on my hands to stop myself doing that. But that's adapting and pivoting, as opposed to pretending to be someone that we're not. And there's a really big distinction there.
Love that. Yeah. And that whole authenticity. So it actually segues beautifully into the next question that I had, Claire, which was, what are some of the ways that you develop your self-awareness? So, there are times when we're all not so self-aware. What are some great tips and lessons you've learned in terms of building those self-awareness?
I think, notice I said I think this time. I'm calling on my logic. That's a perfect example of what I was about to say. As the first thing is, be curious. Like, we've got to stop. Like, it's not, yes, we can do courses. Yes, we can read, we can learn, but this is something that we've got to be committed to deciding to understand within ourselves. So for me, it was taking time to stop and reflect and ask myself questions. Think about things, how do I make decisions? Do I go from the heart? Do I go from the head? Where do I go first? Sometimes I might use both. Where do I go first? In what situations might that flip around? How do I make a decision differently in a stressful situation to a relaxed situation? How do I get my energy? Where do I get my energy from? Do I get my energy from being around people? Do I get my energy from being on my own? How do I process things? So it's just been years and years and years of continually asking myself questions and giving myself the time to actually answer them properly, as opposed to just sitting down and going, right, today I'm going to learn to be self-aware. How do I make decisions? Okay, I think, tick. You can't just do it like that, can you? You're fully all over it as well. It's a lifelong thing. I think when we make the decision to develop ourselves and therefore develop our leadership skills, our career skills, develop ourselves within our business, it's a lifelong thing. And I think the biggest thing we can do is give ourselves time to be curious.
Love it.
Mm.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thanks, Claire.
Pleasure.
Amazing. And actually, that has inspired me to just throw this open to the room a little bit. And I might even just start with you, Graham, just talking about, because you mentioned reflection, Claire, and I think that's a really important thing with self-awareness, being able to reflect. And I know, Graham, you talk about journaling a lot, and I think it's an amazing thing. You talk a lot about the massive benefits, but maybe if you could talk a little bit about reflection, and that's also open to the rest of the room as well.
Yeah, thanks, Jess. Just two things that sort of jumped out at me from what Claire was sharing. And I love the word stop, because it's something that I talked about a lot. Yeah, we need to stop. It's really, really hard to become more self-aware if you're on the treadmill going 100 miles an hour constantly. Really hard. So I love that. And the reflection thing, I've used journaling on and off to great effect for nearly 20 years. So I don't do it all the time, but it absolutely helps when I do it. But the other thing that jumped out at me that I hadn't really thought about in the context of growing your self-awareness is, so it's not just being more aware of what's going on between our ears, but it's checking in with our body. So it's that, you know, I love the fact that you talk about going from your gut, because we could go down the science part of it and talk about the fact that we know that we've got 3 brains. You know, we have the same neurons that are in our brain, there's in our heart, and there's in our gut. So tapping into that, being aware of what your body's telling you, I think is a really important point from a self-awareness perspective. Yeah.
It so is. And, you know, we can get really spiritual about it. And, you know, I wouldn't class myself as really spiritual. However, I'm opening myself up to all modalities right now. I'm lapping up, learning about myself. But absolutely, Graham, I agree. Like I am learning to trust. I can feel physically in my body, you know, when something is right. Like you get that. And again, that's where that whole Reignite in my business name came from, because you get that feeling in the pit of your stomach. What I do is like, yes, like this is right. I might not know exactly all the answers of how I'm going to do this yet. Logically, maybe it doesn't all make sense, but I can feel it. And I'm really learning to tap into that. And I might just add that that's not going to be for everybody. Not everybody is going to be intuition driven and feeling driven. And there might be people listening to this going, well, that's complete BS. Like you've got to use your brain and you've got to, and I hope I can say that, sorry. and that's, you know, that's a big point I want to get across, that we are all different. And just because that's what I'm learning about myself and my self-awareness doesn't mean that that's right for anyone listening. And I think that's where the stopping, taking stock, answering those questions, journaling, even just thinking them out loud or saying them out loud or talking to ourselves or talking to our dog on a walk or something, it just helps us start to get really curious about ourselves.
And Claire, I was just going to say that what you're talking about is putting more tools in your toolkit, because you're not just relying on the tools that are in your head, going with the ones in your heart and your gut. And all of us can learn them. So we all default to what is our preference. But if we want to get better at being aware of ourselves and for others as well, and problem solving and all of those, being able to be curious and build those tools can be really helpful. So I love the fact that you're exploring those different modalities.
Yeah. No, it's great, isn't it? And as I say, like I am learning to trust my gut and follow my gut, but I do understand that a lot of people I interact with don't work like that. So I have to be able to back things up with some logic to bring them along for the ride as well. And remember, we talked about, I think we talked about at the beginning, leadership is about inspiring. It's about bringing people along for the ride. It's about helping people perform better. So we don't help people perform better by making them be sheep and do exactly what we do. We make people perform better. We help people perform better by allowing them to explore their natural preferences, build their self-awareness, learn how they work best. Like that's what it's all about.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, thank you everybody so much for those answers. Amazing stuff. Claire, is it all right? We've got John on the call. Is it all right if he asks a question that we didn't send through before? Is that all right?
Yep, totally fine.
Awesome.
I'll try not to make it too challenging for you.
So yeah, John. John. So today the topic is self-awareness. Do you have a question for Claire about that?
Well, I'm intrigued listening to you talk in terms of your perceptions of a good leader were, you know, certain things, and now they've changed. How's that sort of helped with the relationship side of things?
In terms of how I build relationships with others?
Yeah, engaging with others. So rather than you know, being that micromanager and having to have everyone do it your way, you know, to me, that's very transactional type of a relationship. So, you know, you've changed your approach to people and the way you've become a leader. How's that affected the relationships you have with those people that you lead?
Gotcha. Yeah. Well, it fundamentally at the grassroots level, it makes things so much better, because I know, for example, how to, no, I'm not going to say that I'm perfect at it. I am much better at learning to recognize what drives different people and tapping into that. Now, I've had people come back at me and saying, well, isn't that being fake? You know, if you're talking one way to one person and another way to another person, you know, isn't that being fake? That's not being authentic. But my response to that is, well, it's not, I'm not lying. Like, I'm not, the information that I'm sharing is the same information. I'm just delivering it in a different way. So there might be someone, for example, say I was working on a project. There might be someone, for example, that wants big, long reports of everything that's going on, and wants all the information and wants all the background. And so I'll just flick them, you know, links to Google Drive documents. They can read it and lap it up as much as they want. Someone else might just want the bullet points. Someone else might want a coffee and we'll have a chat about it. Someone else might want to know what their role in it is and what they're going to bring to it, and how, you know, how they can feel inspired about it. And so that's yes, absolutely what it's all about, is recognizing that not everyone processes information the same way. Not everyone works the same way. Not everyone thinks the same way. And so I believe that when you can tap into treating people how they want to be treated, you know, like when you're kids, you're told, you know, you got to treat everyone how you want to be treated. That's how you be polite. That's how you are successful in life. Like, that's not true. Like, not everybody will want to sit down and have an hour-long conversation with me yabbering away at them, kind of thing, and yabbering away back. They might just want a dot point email of the key points. And so for me to be a good leader and for me to get the most out of the people I'm working with, I need to be able to recognize that, and I need to be able to give people what they need, so then they can give me what I need to get a project done, and everybody goes home feeling understood, happy, fulfilled, and not frustrated and exhausted.
Yeah. Oh, cool. Thank you.
Awesome. I think, and that answer totally leads into our final question today, which I'm going to ask, which is, what signs show someone lacks self-awareness? And I feel like this kind of, it's the flip of what you were talking about just then, because you were talking, I guess, before a little bit about micromanaging, and then now you're sort of the other way and helping everybody best understand stuff. But I guess I just wanted to know, yeah, from your perspective, throughout your journey, what have you noticed that you can see in someone and go, oh, this person lacks self-awareness?
I think that it's the blanket approach. You know, it's that micromanagement, it's that one size fits all. And I don't want to send a sweeping generalization out there, but I'm going to. It's very, very prevalent in the accounting world, in the finance world, and that's probably going to come. There might be some repercussions from that, but it's just what I've recognized. In as much as it is a very technical industry, there is a lot of, in my world, blue energy, a lot of C energy and DISC, a lot of logical, analytical, data-driven thinking. I know that I absolutely know that Danette is an accountant, and I know that she is one, like me, who is one of the not your average bean counters. So as I say, it's a sweeping generalization. And I just think in my ramble, I've forgotten the essence of your question already. This is me coming out. But I think when a leader or when a person just broadcasts and doesn't take into account the needs of the people that they're communicating to, you get this kind of icky feeling culture. You get this fake feeling culture. You get people going off on their own agendas. You get people doing their own thing. You get people rebelling against it, because no one feels inspired. No one feels understood. No one feels heard. And yeah, then that starts to build a whole culture of resentment as well. And yeah, I've worked in workplaces like that, and it goes toxic. It goes really toxic, and I've felt it. Like I've gone to work some days. So you can go to work in the best mood, and then you walk through the door and you just feel you feel the energy drained from you. You feel sapped, and that sort of culture is the result of the person at the top of the tree not recognizing what their team needs. And I've worked with teams, and I've said across the table, to the person engaging me, a fish rot from the head. Everybody needs to be a part of this to change this. And when you've got some strong personalities, when you've got some ego, it can be really hard to break that down, as in, it's my way or the highway. There's a lot of that still out there, I think, unfortunately. And it eats away. So signs of it, high absenteeism, high staff turnover, low engagement scores, high, sicknesses, all those sorts of things, lots of back chat, lots of silos, lots of them and us. All those symptoms, I believe, are signs of leaders who just aren't aware of the people in their team.
And
I'd be interested to hear what your guys' perceptions of that are too.
Yeah, I agree. I definitely want to send this around the room, but I was just going to say, once again, I've noticed a similar language around feeling zapped. I noticed you say that, and I feel like all the other stuff that you were talking about is that presented in different ways, people being sick, absent and stuff. It's because they are, maybe when they go in there, feeling sort of zapped or feeling a weird energy that then is creating them to want to do other things, or making them want to do other things that,
exactly.
or even get sick, unfortunately. Yeah. So I think it's another good lesson to listen to what our body is telling us, like what people have been saying around here, that it's going to give you more information.
Absolutely. 100%. Like whether we have awareness. See, at the start of all of my journey, such a buzzword at the moment, but at the start of my self-development journey, I didn't realize that, the fact that I wanted to take a sick day was because of a poor work culture, because my leader wasn't self-aware, and because I was playing a role and acting in a way that wasn't congruent with me. I had no language around that. I had no awareness of that, yet still I knew I wanted to take a sick day. And there was a part of me that was like, this isn't normal. This isn't how I like to work. And that was sort of one of the first signs for me when I started doing things like that, like wanting to pull a sickie when I wasn't sick. I was like, okay, something isn't right here. What's not right? Is it me? Is it the leader? Is it the role? Is it the team? What is it? And this is what I mean. Like we are given clues all the time if we choose to stop and recognize them and get curious about them and ask questions and journal and reflect.
Perfect. Yeah. That's amazing. I guess I just want to throw it up to everybody just for some final thoughts on self-awareness. And I'd love to get everyone's thoughts, because thank you so much, Claire. It's been amazing. We've got such good answers, and I feel like I've learned something about listening to myself beyond what I'm thinking, as a way to become more self-aware and obviously spending more time. But I'd love to go around and get some final thoughts from everybody, just about self-awareness in general. So I might start with Graham. Just some final thoughts on either the conversation today or just general thoughts on self-awareness.
It's been a phenomenal conversation with Claire, so thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Probably the one word that stands out for me is curiosity. I think that's a great place to start from.
Absolutely. Because if I can just butt in again.
Well, sorry, you've got 13 and a half seconds, and then we have to move on to the next thing. But yes, please do.
No, I've forgotten what I was going to say. Yeah, we have to be ready to learn this. We have to be ready to go on this journey. So if we're not curious, as I say, we can't just sit down and just think, right, I'm suddenly going to become self-aware. We have to have this attitude of curiosity, and it be a long-term thing. So yeah, I think you're absolutely right for picking that out. It's probably the key to starting the learning.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you so much for that, Graham. So Alan, any final thoughts on self-awareness or anything from this conversation that you wanted to talk about at the end here?
The big one standing out for me, Jez, is that feelings. And again, what Graham said, it's getting curious about how I feel, where, I guess as most Australian men, we were taught to shut that shit down. Big boys don't cry. We were taught not to feel. And to me, with that, when we take away the feelings, we take away that self-awareness. So it's about bringing back that self-awareness is through feeling, which can be very scary.
It can. You're absolutely right, Al. Like I think there's so much, and I've spoken to I've spoken to some men lately in very alpha male roles who have said the same thing. Like, you're taught, like you're just conditioned, as opposed to being consciously taught. I suppose you're conditioned that that's not how you act in that role. A man of this type doesn't tap into their feelings, doesn't talk about their feelings. They push all that away, and this is how you have to behave. And that's another example, complete extreme, but the same situation as what was happening to me working in accounting firms. You start to just build this wall up, you build this like barrier around you, because it's like you're trying to hold in what's inside, because you've got this natural essence trying to come out, but yet everyone and everything around you and everything you're absorbing around you is telling you something to the contrary. So you're like, oh shit, well, what's wrong with me? I better cover this up and act like that because that's what everyone else is doing. I think you made a really, really great point that sometimes to break that wall down, it's messy and it's hard and it's challenging, and we have to confront some things. But when you come through the other side of that, and you'd know this as well, when you come through the other side of that, there's a whole new world out there.
There is.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you both so much for that. John, I might throw to you. Final thoughts on self-awareness and even just this conversation as well.
I like the idea of the reflection and taking time to reflect on whatever it is that's going on in your life and finding that balance. You know, I know that when people do get down, or they get in a bad way, they get into their head, and that can bring them undone. But we're talking about, trying to take positive steps out of any and all of that, but looking at what you do and why you do it. And we go through life so often and just do without that reflection. And I think reflection also means having quiet time, which we get less and less of because we've got all these devices that we attach to on a daily basis as soon as we wake up. So yeah, that curious reflection, quiet, I think they're the things that are resonating with me.
Absolutely. It's so important, isn't it? Like, if you think about, and this is something that was brought to my attention probably 18 or so months ago, interviewing someone for a conversation, a podcast conversation. And he was in the RFS, the Rural Fire Service, and he was talking about the sort of aftermath of the massive bushfires a couple of years ago, and talking about the debriefing that takes place in the fire service in an emergency event like that. There's like spot in the moment debriefing, then there's sort of a end of shift debriefing, then there's a couple of months down the track debriefing, and I think and like the army would do this, emergency services would do this, and my thinking around that was, well, they do that to learn the lessons, they do that to help them process, they do that to help them fight fires better next time. So why can't we apply that thinking to ourselves?
Yeah.
So think of it, if reflection and journaling doesn't float your boat, think of it as a debrief or an audit. Think of it in those ways, and think about how can I debrief this situation, and if that resonates more, the effect of it is going to be the same.
Yes, I don't disagree with what you're saying.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I love that approach. That's clever. A debrief.
There you go. You see, it's tapping into different people's different needs.
And finally, Danette, final thoughts on self-awareness and just the conversation today.
Yeah, and firstly, thanks, Claire, for coming on our podcast. Really, really appreciate it. Love our conversations. So Claire and I had a number of conversations. I love that bit about curiosity, and one thing I've heard from people who often aren't is they'll go, oh yeah, I'm really self-aware. And in that statement, they then stop being curious. And so anytime we start to think, hey, I've nailed this, I would suggest, just as Claire has done and everyone else on this podcast, that come back to it and go, okay, where am I not as self-aware as I need to be? Because there's so many areas of our life that we need to develop that. So I've loved this conversation. It's been awesome. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been great. And just I'm going to add to that as well, just in the whole theme of things. Why shut up now?
Love it.
I think what I want to pick up on what you just said there is, when we say we're self-aware, we're done. Like, we're never done. We're never done. We can be experts at this. We could have done this for 20, 30, 40 years of our life, been curious, reflected, debriefed, asked questions, but we will change. We change as we get older. We change as we learn more. We change as we up-level our thinking. We change as our situation changes, our environment changes, our priorities change. And so just because we felt self-aware 10 years ago doesn't mean we're self-aware now, because if we're still being the person we were 10 years ago in a completely different situation and set of circumstances and around different people, then we're not being self-aware. Like, this is something that continues. It's not a tick box, is it? I think that's a really important point to make.
Yep. Thanks, Claire.
Awesome. Well, Claire, I want to thank you so much for being on today's podcast. We got so much info, and I want to thank everyone else that was on the podcast as well. We got so much stuff. I just wanted to get any final thoughts from you, and then I think we can wrap up.
Absolutely. I won't take up any more of your airways. I think I've spoken quite enough, but thank you so much. It's been so fun. I love this kind of like roundtable panel discussion. It's awesome.
Awesome.
Thanks so much, Claire.
Yeah, thank you so much, Claire.
Claire.
I want to lead everyone to Reignite Performance Coaching and also Real Life Business with Claire Markwick. You got to check both those out. Their links will both be in the description. I want to thank everyone here on the podcast, and as always, have a magical week, everybody.
Thanks so much, Jez.
Thanks everyone.
Everyone.
Thanks, Jez.
Guys.
Bye.